This is Land of Havilah, Luke 12b. Coming up, we must be ready. Verse 35. Let your waist be dressed and your lamps burning. Be like men watching for their Lord when he returns from the marriage feast, that when he comes and knocks, they may immediately open to him. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord will find watching when he comes. Most certainly I tell you that he will dress himself, make them recline, and will come and serve them. They'll be blessed if he comes in the second or third watch and finds them so. But knowing this, that if the master of the house had known in what hour the thief was coming, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore be ready also, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour that you don't expect him. Comment. The disciples don't understand that Jesus is going to depart, Luke 18:34. So they don't understand what he's saying now about returning, about his second coming. It won't sink in until later, Luke 24:45. In verse 35, the translation says, let your waist be dressed, but it's literally, let your loins be girded. A man would gird his loins for battle or for running. In the same breath, he said, keep your lamps burning, and he goes on to say how we should always be ready for his return because it might happen even in the middle of the night. In other words, in a year or season or time when we don't expect him. When it's been so long that we've forgotten to look for him, that's when he'll come. So we should always keep the lamp burning, even in the dead of night, meaning we should always be awake and ready, our loins girded, always in the contest, not sitting on the sidelines, not in bed with the lights turned off, not asleep, but always taking care of his business, knowing that no matter how long it takes and how much everyone else has forgotten about it, he will come back. Verse 41. Peter said to him, Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everybody? Comment. Peter doesn't know if Jesus is speaking to the 12 or to the entire multitude. As it said in verse 1, there's a multitude of many thousands pressing in, trampling on each other to get near Jesus. So that was difficult, and there's added frustration because the 12 don't understand what Jesus is saying. Verse 42. The Lord said, Who then is the faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the right times? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord will find doing so when he comes. Truly I tell you that he'll set him over all that he has. But if that servant says in his heart, My Lord delays his coming, and begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants, and to eat and drink and to be drunken, then the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he isn't expecting him, and in an hour that he doesn't know, and will cut him in two, and place his portion with the unfaithful. That servant who knew his Lord's will and didn't prepare, nor do what he wanted, will be beaten with many stripes. But he who didn't know and did things worthy of stripes will be beaten with few stripes. To whomever much is given, of him much will be required, and to whom much was entrusted, of him more will be asked. Comment. In response to Peter's question, who are you talking to? Jesus said he was talking to the faithful and wise steward whom the Lord will set over his household to give them their food at the right times. In other words, he's talking to every church leader that he's going to appoint. All of them need to be doing the right thing all the time, rightly teaching and leading the church, not abusing the church or using it for their own benefit. If a leader doesn't perform his duty, then when Christ returns, he'll cut that leader in two and assign him a portion with the unfaithful or beat him with many stripes. The beating will depend on gifting. The more knowledge and gifting, the more severe the beating. To whomever much is given, of him more will be required. This is all in the context of the needy multitudes and the current leaders who aren't feeding them. Therefore, the leaders are due for a beating. Woe to you, Pharisees and lawyers, as he just said in the last chapter. And woe to the negligent and self-serving appointees of God in any age. Verse 49. I came to throw fire on the earth. I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Do you think that I have come to give peace in the earth? I tell you no, but rather division. From now on there will be 5 in one house, divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They'll be divided father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against her mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Comment, the fireworks will start when they crucify Jesus. Some will line up for him and some against. He didn't come to bring peace, but division. It'll be the disciples against the world. A division, a fire, he called it. We're not to surrender the cause, but to fight the good fight, 1 Timothy 6:12. We're not looking for peace with all men, but only, quote, if it is possible, as much as it is up to you, be at peace with all men, Romans 12:18. Some will oppose us, including our relatives at times. Most importantly, we must win the inner fight with ourselves. We'll have to gird our loins for all of it. John Lennon wanted Christians to surrender the fight. Quote, imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. No religion, living life in peace, end quote. That'd be fine if there were no God, but given that there is, the John Lennons of the world will always oppose him, and there's going to be permanent division. Verse 54. He said to the multitudes also, when you see a cloud rising from the west, immediately you say a shower is coming, and so it happens. When a south wind blows, you say there'll be a scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky, but how is it that you don't interpret this time? Comment, how is it that we don't see the clear-cut battle lines in our world today? Why do we want to gloss over the truth of Christ with empty calls for peace? Jesus said it should be easy to interpret the time. He wasn't talking about God's appointed times, as in the time of the second coming, for example. That time's completely unpredictable, as Jesus just said. It might happen in the middle of the night, so to speak, when no one expects it. But we should be able to interpret the times in knowing that there's a continual battle until the final day. Doing right in our politics is part of it. After Saul died, David became king of Judah, and a son of Saul ruled the rest of Israel. Way up north, as far from David's Judah as they could get, there were some men of the tribe of Issachar who left there and came to David because they knew he was God's man for the hour. They were, quote, the children of Issachar, men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do, 1 Chronicles 12:32. We should know the times ourselves and the men of God's choosing in our politics today. As Jesus asked in verse 56, how is it that you don't interpret this time? Long before there was a king in Israel at all, God knew that Israel would demand one, Deuteronomy 28:36. God told them, quote, you shall surely set him king over yourselves, whom Yahweh your God chooses, Deuteronomy 17:15. So if we're Christians, and if we hear from God, how is it we don't interpret the times and agree on political candidates whom Yahweh our God chooses? Verse 57. Why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? For when you're going with your adversary before the magistrate, try diligently on the way to be released from him, lest perhaps he drag you to the judge, and the judge deliver you to the officer, and the officer throw you in prison. I tell you, you will by no means get out of there until you've paid the very last penny. Comment, that was some practical advice from Jesus about settling out of court when we can. But that's not primarily what he was talking about. He was talking about our adversary being God, and that we're headed for his court of judgment, and that before we get there, we need to be released from him. We need to make peace with him ahead of time. Luke 13's next at landofhavilah.net, Luke 13.